Reflection papers. It's one of the most common papers you'll be writing in IGSL. So your professors will ask you from time to time to write a reflection paper on something that you have read or something that you have watched or reflection on the class as a whole. So it's it's worth answering the question, what is a reflection paper? And also, what do we do when we write a reflection paper? So, we are going to talk about those things right now. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And I really wish we could have this live. We could have this discussion live because that's the way I intended it to be. I really wanted to hear your thoughts on reflection papers and yeah, but things didn't go that way. Anyway, we are safe. Those of us who are in IGSL, but many are suffering right now because of the typhoon. It was pretty strong. It's the strongest I have seen as an adult. Yeah, anyway, thank you for your prayers. So let's talk about what you have written down. So, what is a reflection paper? I'm going to read your answers. I think reflection paper is a chance to add our thoughts and analysis to what we have read and experienced. And also, we can say about that our identification of the main themes of the readings. Okay, that's pretty long. Anyway, I like this thought. You're trying to add your thought and analysis. Yeah, so there's some sort of analysis. You When you reflect on something, you analyze it, right? And it's not only on what you have read but also experienced. I like this. Also, we can see that that's from Kuya Sandeep. This one doesn't have a name, but he or she said, I think that a reflection paper is an idea that we want to share our comprehension of the favorite part of the story after reading it. Yeah, that's right. So, from the example that we have seen, this is a good conclusion to make. Yeah, so it's you want to share your comprehension, how well you understood the favorite part of the story after reading it. Yeah, so if you notice, I have been preparing you for something like this since day one. Yeah, I have included that part. Remember, what's your favorite part of the story and why? So that is in essence a reflection. I wanted you to reflect on Hudson Taylor's biography and Adoniram Judson's biography. So, and sometimes I would tell you, from there I would evaluate, like, could you explain why? Why is this your favorite part of the story? Yeah, so I've been preparing you for writing a reflection paper. I particularly like this definition. Where is that? I don't know whose this is again because there's no name. A reflection paper is a process of thinking carefully. That's right. So when we say reflect, we are thinking about something carefully and carefully about what we have done, learned, or experienced in the past, and then towards future changes and improvements. I like it. I really like it because with this kind of definition, you captured, whoever you are, you captured the real meaning of reflection. So it's, yeah, thinking, just like, yeah, but it's not shallow thinking, it's deep thinking, it's careful thinking. And it's not only about reflecting in academic settings, it's something we do in life, right? So what we have done, what we have learned. So he or she didn't even mention about reading materials. It's very general. It's a very general um, answer, right? Because reflection is something you have been doing all your life. All your life, even as a child, you have been reflecting on what's been happening to you. And also like this part. And then towards future changes and improvements, we don't just reflect for the sake of reflection, but it should result in some application, changes, improvements. So this definition is very spot on. Very good. I think a reflection paper is an idea that we want to share a comprehension of the favorite part of the story after reading it. Is it the same thing? Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, did I move it? Okay, now this says a name. This is Monin. Okay. What did Monin say? The reflection paper is a paper that reflected our idea or understanding from the story or the part of the sentences in the topic after we read it. That's right. So there is this idea of how well did you understand? How well did you understand the story or what you have read? Right? And what's your idea? What's your idea on it? Very good, Monin. I think a reflection paper, again no name, is a paper that shares about how a book or chapter influenced or influences the reader. Another good definition. Yeah, so you want to show your professors with your reflection paper how a specific chapter of a book or any other reading material actually influenced you as a reader. That's right. Okay, good job so far. I just wish I could hear these personally from you during our class. That was really the plan. But then I am quite happy to have read your reflections on the example I gave. I didn't even give you a lesson on a reflection paper. I just gave you an example and you reflected quite well. So, yes, I want to give you an applause for that. Yeah, good job. Okay. So basically, what I'm going to do is just reiterate the very things you talked about and show you what a reflection paper is from an academic perspective. So, as you have mentioned, or as someone has mentioned, to reflect is to think deeply or carefully about something. So, it's the opposite. It's not just thinking, it's deep thinking. If I may say, critical thinking. So, how well you reflected will be shown by how deep you thought about it, how deep you thought about the issue or the reading material. Now, with this definition, we can therefore conclude that a reflection paper is something like this. Let's look at this diagram. Let's focus on this diagram for a while. So basically, your professor would give you something to read, or your professor would ask you to reflect on how the class as a whole benefited you. And sometimes the professor would also give you a movie or a video to watch or a sermon. And basically, you have to talk about the effects of these reading material or whatever material on your thinking and practice. On your thinking and practice. So in IGSL, I don't know if they have, usually they talk about this during the freshman integration training, but in IGSL we are very much focused on what we call the head, heart, and hands. 3H. Because we don't want just to learn things in a vacuum. When you say learn things in a vacuum, what we mean is we don't want just to learn things just for adding knowledge or for gaining more information, because we have a mandate to transform the world, to disciple the nations, right? So whatever we learned, it should result to application. So first, it should affect our thinking, and then it should go down to our hearts. It always starts with our thinking. That's what Romans 12 says, right? Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So, what happens or how we think is very important when it comes to our transformation. But it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. It ought to change our hearts. I didn't mention it here. It ought to change our hearts, whatever it is. When we feed our minds with the truth that transforms, eventually our hearts get changed, our convictions get changed, and eventually our hands or practice, our life should change. Yeah, that's why I love not application, this kind of definition. Yeah, whoever you are, good job. Okay, as the diagram suggests, a reflection paper is your identification of the main themes of the readings or the things you learned in the class. Okay, so first you identify what is it you're reflecting on. Okay, you don't just share your reflection when you don't talk about, when you don't identify the things you are reflecting on. Okay, that's why when I ask you, what's your favorite part of the story? And then you will share your reflection. So it starts with the identification of the main themes of the reading. So you can't just choose anything. Your professor would want you to choose the main themes of your readings. Don't focus on the minor things. Try to focus on the major themes of the readings or the major parts of the story, or the things you learned in the class and how they affect your thinking and practice. In other words, a reflection paper is meant to illustrate your understanding of the material, okay, and how it affects your ideas and possible practice in the future. So those are the very things I talked about. Now, why do your professors ask you to write a reflection paper? And why do they do it often? Because a reflection paper measures how much you have reflected or how deeply you have thought about the lessons. It is your professor's way of making sure that you not only added mere knowledge, only knowledge into your head, but that knowledge will powerfully change your life by changing how you think, how you feel, and what you do. Like what I was saying. So this is one of the ways your professors will find out how much you're reading or the things you're learning in the class affect you or transform you, or if they do transform you. So that's one way. Of course, another way would actually be to observe you, right? We have ISG groups. So that's when your ISG leader gets to monitor you personally, your progress, the things you need to do. So in other words, IGSL is about your transformation. We really want to see not just someone who finishes a degree, but someone who gets transformed in the process. So one of the ways, again, not the most important way, but one of the ways for your professors to assess that is through your reflection paper. Thus, a reflection paper is personal. Okay, as opposed to a research paper you write in other subjects in IGSL, you should use first person singular I. You can't do this with research papers. You can't use I. You can't do it in a summary, right? Remember, we don't use first person I. But with reflection paper, you are highly encouraged to do this because it is meant to be personal. It is meant to be personal. You don't write about your neighbor, right? You don't reflect for other people. You reflect for yourself. You reflect for yourself. Okay, so what should it contain? What should it contain? Okay, now I want to see your answers again. Let's go back. What are the parts of a reflection paper? Name them. Okay, let's start with this, huh? Part 1, describe and analyze the actions of the characters in the story. Very good. And relate that action to us that we also experience, like the character in the story. Yeah, in what way? What she or he is trying to say is how this action actually, or how we can relate to the character, right? Is there any similarity, something like that? Very good. And another one is, wow, this is very detailed. You've got an introduction. Yes, that's correct. You've got body paragraph. Oh, this is so detailed. You've got body paragraph. Yeah, so there are 3. And each paragraph contains this. Ah, okay. Okay, did you, Kuya Sandip? Uh, oh, I like the details. The effect of the person, place, or event that had on you at that time. Okay. Lesson learned from reflecting a person. Yeah, that's right. And also there's a conclusion. Yes. Summary of experience, overall impact. Wow, this is quite detailed. Let's look at the other answers. In reflection paper, usually I have 3 parts. The first one is the part that touches our heart, that makes us imagine our part like the character in the story. Very good. Yeah, as I said, you identify what is it that you are reflecting on. So, what is it that touched your heart or challenged you? And the second part is the main lesson we should learn from the story. Yeah, that's good. So, you notice that this is what you have been doing all along. So, in the reading report you're writing, aside from the favorite part, you also have like what lesson can we learn and what would be your application. So those are your reflections. Very good. Whoever wrote this. Third, how do we apply the lesson? Yes, very important. So application should be there. Okay, let's look at this one from Monin. So the reflection paper normally has 3 parts. First, to write down our understanding from a passage that touches our hearts. What do you mean by understanding? Yeah, but I don't know how you can write that, understanding. Second, to write down our experiences that match with the story part. Yeah, you relate it to yourself. That's right. The parts that cause our hearts to shake. Wow, that's very descriptive, Monin. To shake and want to tell the next readers. Yeah, what he's trying to say, I think, is it impacted your heart. It impacted you so much that you want to share it with others. Yeah, good, Monin. Third, to write down the purposes why the author wants us to be, or the author wanted us to partake with his work. Okay, I think he might be talking about the conclusion here. Yeah, so good point. Yeah, good point with this one. I'll show you why. I'll explain later. Now, this one, reflection paper, includes 3 parts normally. First, talk about which part moves you briefly. Very good. Yeah, I like this, briefly, because you don't focus too much on on identifying what touched your heart or what touched your heart or challenged you, because this is a reflection. So I want to see, your professors want to see your reflection, not your summary. Secondly, talk about why it moves you, what you are thinking about yourself from it. Yes, this is the reflection part. Very good. Finally, share some applications from the lessons you have learned. Spot on. Yes, correct. So we also include an application. You got the idea. Good job, guys. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just going to reiterate the very things that you mentioned. Basically, a reflection paper should contain the following. Okay, so this is more like a general guideline. An overview of the material. So you would want to give an overview. It can be a 1 to 2 sentence summary if it is a narrative. Why? Why do we have to give a summary? Because your professor wants to see if you understand the big picture. So maybe this is what Monin was talking about. If you want to see if you were able to see the big picture, so that your reflection would be within that context. Okay, you're not taking things out of context. So give a 1 to 2 sentence summary. Just a little bit. Don't make it too long because this is not a summary paper. Or a thesis statement. Now we're going to be learning what is a thesis statement much later on. We're going to be doing this again. This is not the first time we're writing a reflection paper. This is a reflection paper we're writing for a story or a narrative. And it will be a little bit different when we write a reflection paper for an article or a reflection paper for a non-narrative. So we're going to be doing that, I don't know, 2 weeks from now, perhaps. Okay, so after you provide an overview of the material, things that challenged your thinking, you should also include the things that challenged your thinking or touched your heart and explain how and why. Someone got it. Very good, very good. So this is the reflection part. Okay? This is the time you talk about your actual reflection. Why did it challenge you? Why did it touch your heart? Yeah, so this is the most important part. And of course, next to it is the application. How can you apply the things you have learned in your life now and in the future? So when it comes to application, you would want to be more to be specific to be as specific as possible, not too specific, but specific enough. And when you write your reading report, I don't know if you've been reading my feedback. I would sometimes write like, "Oh, very good application." That means, wow, that was a specific application. Most of the time, you would write good applications. I mean, they are specific, they're personal, but sometimes I would also see some of you write like a very vague application, and I would say, could you be more specific? Could you be more specific? So give a more specific application. Okay, now let me show you the sample outline for a reflection paper. This is a sample outline because every professor would have a different preference when it comes to writing a reflection paper. So sometimes they would give you the outline that you need to follow, okay? And you have to follow that. Sometimes they would not give you any outline at all. So you can use this, or you can also improvise your own outline, because the most important thing is that you have these three things. Okay, this is more like a general guideline on how to what to write in a reflection paper, and this is more like a sample outline. It will be dependent on your professor. It will depend on your professor and his preference. But let's look at the sample outline, because this is what I'm going to be asking you to do for your writing project number 5. So first is the introduction. So in the introduction, you simply include the author and authors. In our case, uh, the biography was written by two persons, right? So two authors. And of course, the title of the book you are reflecting on and the chapter. Yeah, you should be very clear about this. Just like what I did here. Look at the example. Janet and Jeff Bench, I don't know, present an interesting part of Adoniram Judson's biography in chapter 5. So in this sentence, I was able to identify the author, the title of the book. Well, not really the title. I dropped the title, but I just changed it to Adoniram Judson's biography. And then the chapter I was reflecting on. And the title of the chapter right here. Okay? Let me just change it. And also, after that, you need to give an overview of the chapter. As I said, it can be a brief summary, 1 to 2 sentence. In this chapter, Adoniram was finally able to share about his calling to Burma as a missionary with his family in the seminary where he is attending. Yeah, that's an overview, right? It's just 1 sentence. You don't need to give too much details because your goal is to just give an overview. And then after that, you write an introductory statement. What are you going to be writing about? So you have to signal to them that you're going to be giving your reflections. And one way to do that is this. Let me share with you some parts of the chapter that inspired me. There are several ways you can introduce your reflection, and I would want you to explore different options. Don't copy mine, okay? Because we had an incident before. I gave this sample to the students, English students, and then later on, they wrote the same thing. I mean, the same introductory sentence. So the professor approached me and said, "Okay, why is it that they were writing the same thing, the exact same thing?" And then I talked to them, and they thought that that's the only way to write it. There are several ways you can write an introductory statement. So I want you to come up with your own. Okay? Let me share my reflections on some of my favorite parts of the chapter, something like that. Okay, I want you to be creative. All right, next is, of course, the body. So in the body, you can come up with 2 to 3 reflections, which means 1 paragraph for each reflection. Okay? Now, what does each paragraph look like? So the first part, the part of the story that touched your heart or challenged your thinking, this is also mentioned you also mentioned this in our Padlet page. And so first you identify what part, okay? And don't focus on this too much. Don't make it long, all right? And why and how it challenged your thinking. This is the reflection part. Afterwards, you can talk about the application. So that's what I did here, right? Firstly, I was inspired by Adoniram's commitment to God's calling. Yeah, so this is the part I was reflecting on. The part of the story that touched my heart or challenged my thinking. Yeah, so there goes my reflection. It was not easy for him to let go of a prominent position as an assistant to a pastor of the biggest church in Boston, and then blah, 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 blah. And this part right here, this is what I want to point out. I can very well relate to it. When I told my family, try to relate it. Try to relate it. Don't force it, huh? Don't force it. But try to find a way you can relate your experience. The more you talk about your experience, since this is a reflection paper, the more you talk about how well you can relate to the story, the better, the deeper your reflection paper will be. Okay? And then after that, you can talk about your application. So where is my application part here? Yeah. I learned that no matter what, I should know for sure what God is calling me to do. And when I do, I need to be firm in it, even if it's unpopular to others. Yeah, something like that. So it can be, yeah, you have to make it as specific as possible. Okay, so I'm not gonna talk about the other part because it's similar. It's similar. So second reflection also contains the same thing. So you can have 2 to 3 reflections, nothing beyond that. Don't go beyond that because it will be too long. So develop well your paragraphs. Okay, make sure that your transitions are still okay, are still smooth. Don't just try to, give the required parts for each paragraph, but try to connect them, make them as smooth as possible when you try to write your reflection. Okay, and the last part is the conclusion. The conclusion. Now, in the conclusion, it can include any of the following. So, again, any of the following. It doesn't have to be all of them, huh? It doesn't have to be all of them. You can choose any or just one of them. First, you can talk about the relevance of the chapter to a bigger context. That means, so in the body, you related it to yourself, right? In the conclusion, you can talk about the bigger context. So you can start talking about your culture, your church. When I say church, capital C, that means the body of Christ in your country, or it can be your local church. I think you can't talk much about IGSL right now because you're not here. You're not immersed into the community yet. Or you can talk about the church in general, the universal church, the body of Christ. Yeah, so again, the relevance. How is it connected? How do you think Hudson's story or the things you reflected upon relate to to a bigger context? Okay? Talk about it. How important, when we say relevance, how important is Hudson Taylor's story to our day? Or is it important? Does it matter? Yeah, so that's what we mean when we say relevance. Also, challenge. You can pose some challenge or challenges. It can be in the form of questions, or it can also be recommendations. Yeah, so with this, I recommend that we should blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so you can choose any of them. Let's look at my example. In conclusion, Adoniram Judson should serve as an inspiration for us to go if we are called for missions. So there are 2 things. Serve as an inspiration for us to go or to actively support others or called to do so. Though more countries have been reached today compared to Adoniram's time, a lot of people still have not heard of Jesus and his power to transform their lives. The challenge that I want to pose at this point is, what is your current involvement in missions? Yes, we have a lot to take care of people in our we have a lot to take care of people in our immediate surrounding. Oh, this is wrong. We have a lot of people to take care of. Sorry about that. In our immediate surrounding, but God also has his eyes on the lost nations. God wants us to be involved in missions directly by going or indirectly by supporting others. So again, the question is, how actively are you involved in missions? Okay, now what did I try to do here? Did I talk about the relevance of the chapter? Did I talk about the challenge? Or did I talk about recommendations? That's a tricky question. Yeah, so I talked about the church as a whole, right? Like I'm talking to other Christians. I'm talking about other Christians. I'm talking to other Christians, especially for those who are called to missions. Um, that if they're called to missions, they should go, and if not, they should support others. So I'm talking about the general body of Christ. So I am, in a way, I am talking about this, like the relevance of the chapter, but I focus more on challenge. I don't know if you noticed that. The question is how actively are you involved in missions? So what I'm trying to say here is we see that missions is very important. Yeah, that's what we can learn from Adoniram. So you have two roles. Either you go or you send others. It's just like that. It's just like that. As a Christian, that's the question we need to answer. Are we going or are we sending others? If you're not going, then we should help others by praying for them, by supporting them financially. Yeah, we should be involved in missions. That's what I was trying to say. So it's more like a challenge. What I was trying to do here was to challenge them. Okay? You can combine these three things if you want. But you can also just focus on one. It's up to you. Okay. Now, with these things being said, I hope everything was clear. Again, this is not just an English lesson. Yeah, it's more like a critical thinking lesson. Because we're not talking about language anymore. We're talking about how to think. Yeah, so it's very important. Critical thinking is very important in IGSL. That's why, as an English teacher, I can't just teach you English, but I also have to teach you, actually not teach, but help you to think critically. Yeah, and some of you, I can see that it's very natural. It's very natural. When I read your reading reports, I'm just amazed with some of you because, wow, this person reflects quite deeply. But some of you, I have to admit, you need to work on your critical thinking skills. And I'm here to guide you. So this is one of the things we'll be doing this semester and next semester. So this is not the last time we're going to be talking about the reflection paper, because critical thinking is developed over time. So we are going to work on our critical thinking through this exercise and many more. All right. Let's talk about evaluating your reflection paper. So after you write a reflection paper, you ought to evaluate your own reflection paper before you submit it. Okay? So for each paragraph in the body of your reflection paper, you can ask these questions again. For each paragraph in the body. So we're talking about the body part, okay? And your reflection should be for each paragraph. One paragraph, another paragraph. Okay, here are the questions you need to ask yourself. 1. Is it focused on one part of the story only? Because each paragraph contains one reflection, right? So try to focus on only one part of the story as much as possible. But if there are two or three parts of the story that are very similar and you can arrive at just one reflection, I don't have a problem with that. But to be safe, you can just write one part of the story. Next, is the reflection based on an important part of the story? Yes. So every paragraph should focus on one point or one part of the story, yes, but also an important one, a major one. Okay? If I see that you're reflecting on a minor part of the story, I would call your attention. I would call your attention because I really want you to focus on the major part of the story. So the one that are important in development of the story as a whole. Also, is it deep enough? If it's not deep enough, how can you make it deep or deeper? Yeah, so this is a very subjective question, and there's not just there's more than one way to answer this. Is it deep enough? Yeah. Tomorrow I'll be demonstrating how you can evaluate your classmates' uh, reflection paper, or not reflection paper, just a reflection, because I would ask you to write one paragraph, right? So tomorrow I will be sending you a video of an actual evaluation of one reflection using these questions. Also, is it personal? Or are you talking about your neighbor in your body? Again, this is the body. In your conclusion, you can talk about your neighbor. But in your body, you ought to talk about yourself. Is it connected to the story? Is your reflection connected to the story? That's very important. So make sure that you don't you always connect it to the story. Is what challenged or inspired you clearly stated? Yeah, so you have to state which part of the story challenged or inspired you. And of course, after that, you have to explain why. Is the application practical? Is it something you can do? Is the application related to the story or to the lesson you learned from the story? Yes, that's very important. And I can say that most of you are doing well in terms of your reading report, the lesson and application part. So I hope you would do well in this part as well. And last one is your reflection longer than your summary? Because I have had many students in the past who would write a very long summary, like they're trying to talk about the things that challenge them, and it's very long, but when it comes to the reflection, it's only 1 to 2 sentences. So I would tell them, hey, this is not a summary paper, it's a reflection paper, so make sure that you focus on your reflection. Okay? But your writing project number 6, you will be writing a summary actually. Summary and reflection. So it's a summary and reflection paper. The reason why I'm asking you to do that is because some of your professors would ask you to do that. They would not just ask you to reflect on it, but they would also ask you to write a summary of it, of whatever you've read. Okay, that concludes our short lesson. No, not short. It's long. I think it's long already. A lesson on how to write a reflection paper. If you have any question, I'm just a Slack message away. Okay, so I will be checking my Slack. So far, so good. Our internet connection has been stable, I think. But if it does have a problem, if I don't reply, that means it has become unstable. All right, so I'll be looking forward to your reflection in our discussion forum. Have a good day.